I think a lot of parents, they get upset at the child. They're like, I told you to do this. I can't believe you didn't do this. I'm so frustrated with you. Well, you expected this child
to get it right every single time. Parents should do that if they're not already doing that, because it also relieves a lot of the frustration that parents have. Like, we understand, like, it can be frustrating sometimes. And like you said, it's because you have expectations that you think are logical, right?
But still, you should not have the expectation that a child's not going to do that. And you'll be better off. But that illustrates the point. It's harder to have not that expectation, right? That the ones that impact you.
It's normal. I want to mention that it's normal to even sometimes have expectations if you understand this. Like, I'm not saying follow through with the expectations, but there have been plenty of times in our relationship where I've had an expectation and it's caused me to get upset. You've had an expectation and it's caused you to get upset. Like, this isn't something that's just going to instantly change. It's something that you have to actively keep yourself from having expectations and rather having standards, because our human brains naturally want to go to expectations, right? But you have to actively, if you're thinking of an expectation that you have, be like, nope, I need to instead have a standard for this. And how does that look versus an expectation, and then implement that. And sometimes that means like not just saying whatever pops into your head, like taking a moment and being like, is this an expectation I have? Or if you're feeling angry and you don't really know why, or like you're upset, be like, okay, did I have an expectation?
Right.
And if I did, do I just let it go because it's my fault because I had an expectation?
Right.
Do I need to have a conversation and make this like a standard sort of thing or a boundary that I have? Like, you definitely have to assess like what's going on inside of you, because it's not going to be like you watch this episode and now you have standards and never have expectations. Like, expectations will pop into your head and they will try to control you to control someone else.
Exactly.
But you have to fight against that.
Yeah. And it's a constant battle. You're never going to get rid of all your expectations. But if you're aware of it, then you can start to get rid of expectations. And it's really helpful in parenting, obviously, as well, right? Because, you know, the way that we parent, for example, you never see me yell at Sophia. I mean, you don't either, right? We don't. But I don't really get upset. I mean, I'm not going to say that I never get upset, right?
Well, it's more
obviously,
like frustrated, because anybody knows that it can be frustrating.
But even that is an expectation. That's where that's coming from. But in general, I try not to have expectations, because it's like, you know, she has consequences many times for doesn't clean her room, you know, doesn't get up on time or whatever. Although we haven't had that one in a long time, but go to bed on time. So when that happens, I think a lot of parents, they get upset at the child. They're like, I told you to do this. I can't believe you didn't do this. I'm so frustrated with you, right? And it's like, well, you expected this child
to get it right every single time.
Where it's like, that you can have the standard that says, hey, if you don't do the rules, then you have consequences, and that's it. I don't care if you have the consequences. I don't want you to have the consequences, but I don't have any control. I don't have any emotional stake in you making these choices. If you didn't choose to clean your room and that was what you're supposed to do, hey, then you've lost your electronics for, you know, however many days, and that's up to you. I'm not going to get angry or upset about it, because I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter to me. You know, I mean, obviously I would prefer you to do it, but it's your choice. So, you know,
well, it's easier too, because it's not your consequence and your emotion that you're dealing with, right? Like, it is easier to have standards versus expectations. I feel like, at least for us in parenting, it does get a little harder with like romantic connections, just because you're so intertwined. You know, and it's like, you can love somebody so much, and then what if they do cheat on you? And that also affects your life, you know? So like, someone else's actions in a relationship do typically impact your life more than, so like, say that your kid doesn't clean their room, right?
Yeah, it's harder.
But that's a good example, because parents should do that if they're not already doing that, because it also relieves a lot of the frustration that parents have. Like, we understand, like, it can be frustrating sometimes. And like you said, it's because you have expectations that you think are logical, right? Like, but they're kids, like, things are going to get broken. Mistakes are going to be made. And if you just have the standard for whatever thing pops up, then it also helps you not get so worked up, and you're able to be more regulated for your child when they're dealing with their emotions about the situation, right? So I think it is good to bring that up. But I think romantic relationship wise,
it's harder.
It's harder because you even when someone else makes a decision, it normally affects you still. Right. And that's also too why I'm sure people gravitate towards having expectations and trying to be controlling because they're trying to make sure their side of the road stays peachy keen and looks nice and clean, but you're on the same, 2-lane road. Like it's the same road.
Right.
But you have 2 different lanes. And if something comes and wrecks in the middle of your road, it's blocking both sides, right?
But there's a lot of situations where that's going to be the case, not just in the relationship. I mean, even just with the child example, if your child knocks over a vase full of water and the glass is all over the place, you have to clean it up. Or you have glass, it does affect your life. Yeah. But still, you should not have the expectation that a child's not going to do that, and just you'll be better off. But that illustrates the point. It's harder to have not that expectation, right? That the ones that impact you. But in relationship, for sure, that's true. But one of the best things I ever did in my life was, and I had the thought of, I'm no longer going to put expectations on people. I'm no longer going to allow them to put expectations on me. And when I did that, that completely changed my life. Obviously you can't perfectly implement that, but just having that philosophy in life completely changed the way that I looked at life, and it freed me, because it's also very burdensome trying to control people and trying to control emotions and situations, because if you have to try and get everyone how to act how you need them to act, that's a lot of administrative overhead and work that you have to do to keep everyone in line.
Micromanaging.
Right. But if you're like, look, you guys, everyone can do whatever they want to do. You can act how you want. You can whatever. I don't care. It doesn't matter. But if you act a certain way, I'm not going to have you in my life. Right. And that's what I started actually doing with people, is I started just cutting people out of my life. I was like, yeah, you can talk to me like that if you want to, but if you talk to me like that, then I'm not going to talk to you. So, and people got really upset about that, but at that point, I didn't care, because I'm like, okay, well, this is my standard. This is what and I think what it comes down to is expectations make you weak, and standards make you powerful, right? Because like even in the parenting situation, if you have expectations on your child, you have to like nag them and constantly tell them what you need them to do, right? Because it's like your emotional well-being depends on them following through and doing the thing,
the
right?
Expectation, yeah.
So that makes you weak, because now you're beholden to them. Whereas if you have standards and you have consequences, boundaries, then you're powerful, because you ultimately say what's going to happen and what's going to go. And you have that power within your own life, right? Because every single one of us has the autonomy in our own life to be able to say who is in our life and who's not, and what we will do, and what relationships we'll have, and how we'll respond to them. And sometimes those things are things that we might not want to cut or create the consequences, but you can't have it both ways. The power that you have, every individual has that same power to say, yeah, if you act this way, if you do this thing, you're not in my life. And there's nothing wrong with having that's the other thing I want to talk about in this episode, was because...
Well, before you go off on another thing, is this like a different side? Because I wanted to say something.
I was just going to say...
Based on what you're saying right now.
I was just going to say it's okay to have we could talk about, like, is it okay to have standards? But yeah, go ahead. What you're saying.
Well, I want to kind of make it a little more clear, I guess, too. Like, you're making it clear, but I want people to understand what you said about power, because they think having an expectation is power, like you said. But how is that actual power when in your head you are creating a scenario that no one else knows about, and then you're only happy when it's fulfilled? And all this is internal. No one sees any of this.
Right.
You think in your mind it's power.
Right.
But outwardly it's nothing, because it's all happening internally. Whereas if you have a standard where you have to walk away once you laid something out, if it's not meeting your standard, that is the actual power that people can see, because now you are implementing your power to walk away because you have a standard.
Right.
So what they need to realize is it might feel like you have the power when you have an expectation, but it's all internal.
Exactly.
Nobody sees that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have a standard, it's internal, because you're like, look, this happened, so now I have to do this. And you have that power, but also outwardly you're expressing that, you're laying it out, and you're making it so everybody understands. And that is where the actual power lies, like you said.
Yeah.
So hopefully that helps people realize that you have like a false sense of power with expectations,
right,
whereas you actually have the power over yourself and the situation when you have standards.
exactly. Yeah.